everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the months of August and September. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer video because I am combining 2 months into one, just because I was in the biggest reading slump of the year in August and I didn't feel like reading and I didn't feel like filming or anything. So let's get right into the video. Because I'm doing 2 months at a time, I'm just going to go in the order I read them. So instead of breaking them down by genre or star rating, it's just going to be in chronological order. So the first book I finished in August was The 11th Metal by Brandon Sanderson. And this was just a short story in the Arcanum Unbound bind up. And it was okay. Like, I felt that it added nothing to the story, no backstory that I just really wanted to have. It was just okay for me. I am working my way through the rest of the stories in that collection, and I had to say, I don't know, a lot of them I just feel like were not necessary, but I want to wrap up all of my current series that I'm reading in Sanderson so I can get a clean slate in 2025 and focus on a new author, because 2024 has been Sanderson heavy for me. Anyway, so yeah, The 11th Metal, it was just okay. It didn't add anything to the story in my opinion. Okay, the next book I read was Better Than College, How to Build a Successful Life Without a 4-Year Degree. And so this book is a book that has been sitting on my shelf since my oldest was probably a junior in high school. And I never got around to reading it. So it was just like one of my nonfiction picks for the year. And I'm really glad I read it. It was really interesting. It was a great perspective on how to get the career that you may want outside of something that you need a degree for, like, you know, an attorney, a teacher, a doctor, something like that. But just how to go about getting life experience, how to maybe take a gap year, how to travel more as a young adult. And I found it interesting. I'm glad I read it. I passed it on to Savannah Grace. I don't think she's read it yet, but I just thought she does want to go to college. But as an alternative, she may change her mind, and so this book may be a good resource for her to have. The next book I finished was The Posthumous Memoirs of Bras Kubas, and this was one of my classic picks for the month of August, and I have to say I really enjoyed it. It was kind of strange, but in a good way. It was about this guy who passes away, and he's writing his memoirs from the grave. And so he's telling his story, and it's really witty, it's funny. It's not like any other classic I've read, which was nice to get something a little bit different, and I would recommend it. I thought it was hilarious. There were times when I was laughing out loud. I'm like, this is just ridiculous, but I really enjoyed this one as well. Okay, so now getting into the start of my slump. I saved a ton of what I felt would be hits for me this summer, just beachy, fun reads. And the first one I picked up was Dragon Fruit. Actually, this wasn't the first one I picked up. I DNF'd several before I got to this one. But the first one I finished out of those was Dragon Fruit. And it was okay. I really, like, the premise was neat. So it's like this island, this girl, it's a young adult. So this girl lives on an island, and she her father steals a dragon egg because you get like a wish from a dragon egg, and because he stole it, he was like ostracized. So she hasn't been able to go back to her island since this happened, and she is on this quest to find herself a dragon egg to right the wrong that her father did and try to like make up for what her father did by stealing this dragon egg. And so the premise was really neat. The world, I wish, had a little bit more world building. Like, I wish, this is such a neat, like, vibrant island story. And again, maybe it was because I was I was in a slump, but I just felt like it was almost a little bit one-dimensional. I wish the world were deeper and we learned more about this culture that she lived in, because it was really fascinating, but I felt like it just scratched the surface. The next book I picked up was Within the Sanctuary of Wings by Marie Brennan, which is the final book in the Lady Trent series. And I felt like it was a great conclusion. I can't really say much about it because obviously it's the last book of the series, but I felt like it went in a direction that I was not expecting at all. And if you know, you know, but I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a great full circle wrap up of the entire series of her memoirs, and the first one was still my favorite, but this one was also really, really enjoyable. Okay, back to a slumpy book. The next book I tried to finish, I only finished 2 books on my beach trip, which is kind of unheard of. Savannah Grace finished, I think, 5. Because when we go to the beach, we go to the beach. We don't like do a lot of stuff. We just sit and soak up the beach. So normally I get a lot of reading done, but I also have a 6-year-old, so that didn't help the situation at all. But anyway, so the next book I picked up was Soul of the Deep, and this was the conclusion of a duology. The first one was Skin of the Sea, which I remember, and I think the problem with this book is I read it so far away from the first book, but I remember enjoying the first book so much more than this second book. I felt like the second book was not really necessary, to be honest with you. It follows the same, I forget her name, but it follows the same mermaid that we're introduced to in Skin of the Sea, and she's just continuing her journey. Again, I can't say too much about like what she's doing because it'll give away spoilers, but I actually had a really hard time finishing this book for whatever reason. The last few chapters felt really, really dark for me, and I actually just like skimmed those chapters and did not read them very deeply at all because it felt so dark. And I don't know, I don't remember getting that vibe from the first one, but I definitely did from Soul of the Deep. So I don't even have it anymore. It's in my, well, I do have it. It's in my like bin to get rid of, like, because I'm going to go to McKay's in a few weeks. So I'm going to take that with me and just donate it. But yeah, so I don't know. It wasn't great. I do not recommend, but that's okay. That's okay. Like, that's like the end of the beach slump. Okay. So now we're back home, you know, and reading things that are more interesting to me. So the next thing I picked up was The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. And this was our in-person book club pick for the month of August. And I loved it. I had never read it before. I thought it was so clever. I thought it was hilarious. It was just so fun. And it was definitely my favorite read of the entire month. But yeah, it's a play. So it's very short. I think it's just two acts. I loved that play, and I definitely want to read more of his work. So, okay, so after that, I feel like the month of August, I say was a big slump, but I read a lot of books. I just didn't enjoy what I was reading. But the next book I picked up was the Kagawa Food Detectives, and this I feel like was right book, wrong time for me. I thought this was just okay. There was no detectiving in this detective book, which was really a bummer. So basically it's like this guy used to be a detective, and he opened up this restaurant, and people come in and they want him to find and recreate a recipe from their past. And it could be something that their mother made them when they were a child, and she's passed away, or it could be, you know, just whatever. And he has to find this recipe and recreate it. And in the process, he finds out why this recipe is important to them. However, basically the customer walks into his store, they tell them like the clues, what they remember about the recipe, and then they're like, okay, come back in a week and we'll have your recipe. And then they come back in a week and they have the recipe. So there's no like process of him figuring out why they want this recipe, he goes about getting this recipe or anything. It's just like, here's what I want. Okay, come back in a week. You've got it. And so I wish that it was more detailed as far as the detectiving goes. Also, there's a cat on the cover, and the cat is mentioned offhandedly every chapter, and I kept waiting for like the cat to have magical powers or something, because the cat is mentioned in a very kind of bizarre way. And spoiler, the cat does not have magical powers. It's just a cat that's just randomly mentioned. But I feel like had I read this maybe towards the fall, not like on the tail end of a book slump, I would have enjoyed it more. I think I still would have had issues with the things that I had issues with, but it was still enjoyable. The next book I picked up was Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, and I was excited to read another book by her. I really, really loved Rebecca and My Cousin Rachel. And again, I think this was right book, wrong time, because it was just okay for me. And it did have like the creepy vibes that you expect from a du Maurier, just kind of unsettling, like what is happening and why. But it just didn't land as well as the other two did for me. It was still enjoyable, but I just didn't like it as much. But this is just about like this girl who her mother dies, so she goes to live with her aunt and her uncle at Jamaica Inn, and this is this inn that they run, and something is off about this inn. People don't come visit it anymore. She's told to lock her door at night and not come out under any circumstances, and there's just something going on about this place. So she finds herself, like, of course, trying to figure out what's going on. And again, as I'm hearing myself describe this, it sounds like it would be right up my alley. So I honestly think that I should have just waited, and I wish I would have read it at a different time, because I think I would have enjoyed it so much more than I did. But anyway, so yeah. Okay, so the last book I picked up in August was the 12th volume of Spy Family, and I think this just came out in August. Maybe it came out in July. So, I mean, Spy Family is still a great time, still enjoying the series. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm enjoying my time reading these as they come out, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So that is it for the month of August. Now on to the month of September. So the first book I picked up in September was The Alloy of Law, which is the first book in the Mistborn Era 2 series. I would say trilogy, but a fourth book came out. And I had such a good time rereading this. I am really glad that I joined Tiffany's Mist Along as she's been reading these. And because it's just been fun to just jump back into this world. Wax and Wayne are hilarious. Steris is one of my favorites. It's just a great time. It's a lot more fun and laid back than Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive. It kind of has a Western feel, and it's just a lot of fun. So glad to have read this. So ever since Dandelion Wine, I have been on, I don't know, maybe a Bradbury kick a little bit. And so I picked up Fahrenheit 451. And my goodness, I love this. Reading this makes me think that I need to reread Something Wicked This Way Comes for sure at a better time. And I think I would love it this time around. But I really, really liked this. So basically, this is a book about firefighters, but instead of putting out fires, they start fires because books are not allowed. And it's about a particular firefighter and how he's like, questioning the system and why he is having to start fires. And he's like, but wait a minute, didn't firefighters back in the day used to put out fires, not start them? And everyone in the the station is like, no, that's ridiculous. Firefighters have always started fires. Like, that's our job. Anyway, this was so good. I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a quick read for me. I flew through it because I was enjoying it so much. And it was just a really great time. And I don't know. I just really like Ray Bradbury now. Like, he's quickly rising in the ranks of one of my top favorite authors, which is ridiculous to think about if you would have heard how I talked about Something Wicked This Way Comes at our book club, because I did not like that. But okay, I really think I would now. Anyway, moving on. Okay, the next book I'm adding just because I just want to remember that I read this. I don't know. Anyway, it was Dinosaurs Before Dark by Mary Pope Osborne. It was the Magic Treehouse series, the first one. And I read this with my 6-year-old. And this was the first chapter book we read together. And it was just a special time. I mean, obviously, these books are nothing groundbreaking or anything like that. But I knew he would love it because it had something to do with dinosaurs. And this is the first book that he's let me read to him all the way through. He has hated books up to this point in his life, and it's really been sad for me because I am such a reader. But so anyway, I just wanted to kind of like commemorate the first book he and I read together and finished. But it was fun because he's like, oh, one more chapter. I'm like, oh, my heart. It was just so sweet. Anyway. The next book I picked up was on my nonfiction list for the year, and it's Why I Didn't Rebel. A 22-year-old explains why she stayed on the straight and narrow and how your kids can too. I did not pick this up because I have rebellious kids. I have great kids. Like, I literally have phenomenal children. I have people tell me all the time how great my kids are, and I take no credit. It's the Lord for sure, but don't think that I have bad kids because I picked this up. It's been on my shelf for a while too, and so I just wanted to get to it. I'm going to give it to somebody in my church, and it was not exactly what I was expecting. I thought it would be more geared towards the teenage years because it's a young adult writing about her teenage years, but really it's kind of about things that you can do when your kids are young to establish a good relationship with them, and that relationship in turn helps keep them from rebelling. So it wasn't necessarily a parenting book that I needed, but it was on my shelf. I wanted to read it so it could get off of my shelf if I wanted to get it off my shelf. So I'm glad I read it for that respect. Again, it wasn't anything groundbreaking or novel. A lot of these things we do on a normal basis anyway, you know, things like eat dinner together, set clear expectation, you know, like actively listen. I don't know. Anyway, so it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I'm glad I read it. So the next book I picked up was Shadows of Self. This is the second book in the Mistborn Era 2 series. I was supposed to read Alloy of Law, I think, in August and this in September, but I read both in September, but it's fine. But again, it's just such a fun ride. Like, it's just, Wayne and his humor are hilarious. I love Wayne's humor. And again, Steris, you get to see more of Steris in this book. And she's one of my favorites in the whole series. She's great. She's so self-aware, and she's just like, this is how I am. I realize that people think I'm crazy, but this is just how I am, and I'm sorry, but you're just gonna have to live with it. Anyway, so I'm really enjoying my reread of this series. The next book I picked up was Wuthering Heights, and I have never read Wuthering Heights, but my goodness, the drama, oh my goodness, I would have devoured this. I would have been obsessed with this as a teenager because of the drama. Thankfully, I knew going in that it was not supposed to be a romantic love story, which it definitely is not. These characters are toxic. There is nothing about their relationship that is healthy. And I feel like I would have realized that as a teenager as well, but I still would have been all about the drama. But yeah, so I was glad that I knew not to expect a love story, because I feel like I wouldn't have enjoyed this as much had I been expecting Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre or something like that. But yeah, Heathcliff is not dreamy, but he is very very readable. Like, this was so readable. I just could not get enough of this. I loved it so much. Which I feel like that is kind of an unpopular opinion because the relationship is so toxic. So people are like, oh, these characters, they suck, they're terrible. They do, and they are terrible, but I still loved it so much. All right, another Brandon Sanderson. I told you 2024 was so Sanderson heavy, but this is Starsight. This is the second book in the the Skyward series. And I gotta say, so I did not like this as much on reread as I did Skyward. Skyward still held up for me. It was still great. And then this one was a little bit of a step down on reread. Because she goes on this mission, and the characters that we get to know and love in Skyward aren't even really in Starsight. So it's a bummer. And of course you meet new characters, but I don't know. It just kind of was a step down for me. The next one I picked up was another Sanderson. Alamancer Jack and the Pits of Elania, which was a short story in the Arcanum Unbounded bind up. And again, it was fun. Like, it's set in the Mistborn Era 2 world, and so it's about this really over the top sensational hero out in the sticks, or no, what is it called? I don't know, out in the Wild West pretty much, and how he just is a little bit sensational and over the top, and it's like a newspaper, like people send his story to the newspaper. The thing that made it good and enjoyable for me were the footnotes, because sorry, my dog is barking. She's hooked up because drywallers are in the house, and they're a little scared of her because she's big. The thing that made this enjoyable for me were the footnotes, because the person who is writing his story, he'll say something, and then the person who's writing it is like, well, that didn't really happen, it happened more like this, or he made me leave this in here even though it's absolutely ridiculous, stuff like that. So that was fun. All right, after that I picked up Defy the Night, and this is a YA, kind of like a Robin Hood story, and it's a dual perspective. It's heavy on the romance, and it was good. It was like action-packed and just a fun, quick read. It's nothing groundbreaking. I don't think I will continue with the series. I will pass this on to Savannah Grace because I think she would really like it, but it was not anything great. So like, this country is like being torn apart because people are dying, and the only thing that can save them are these special flowers. And so of course the rich buy all of these flowers, and so this girl steals from the rich to give to the poor, and so it's kind of like a Robin Hood spin, but it was fun. It was a fun one. The last book I'm going to talk about for the month of September was a doozy. It was the book we chose for our in-person book club, and like, on a purely enjoyable reading experience, this was definitely a 1-star. Okay, it's Cain's Jawbone. It was definitely a 1-star. Like, if you sit down and you read it all the way through, it was not enjoyable. But when we all got together, we spent, I think, like 4 hours trying to solve this puzzle. And finally, we were getting nowhere. We had solved a tiny, tiny portion of it. There are several different narrators, several different murderers, several different victims. We had found one narrator and one storyline, and we didn't even get all of those in the correct spot once we like ordered them. So I had to look up spoilers, and I had to go on a deep dive in Reddit, and I had to like click on redacted things so they would pop up. Like, this secret to solving this book is well guarded. And so I have the answers, and then everyone else in the book club was I would say, okay, this clue is for this narrator. And then they were like, oh, well, does this go with this narrator or this narrator? And so we finally got the narrator separated out after 4+ hours, but we don't have the stories in order or anything. So it's definitely an undertaking. People spend months trying to solve this book. We were definitely naive in thinking we could solve it in one evening for sure, but doing that together was a lot of fun. There are so many literary references, historical references, and it was fun getting to bounce off people's different knowledge on different subjects and be able to piece it together that way. And it's really fun because we had just read The Importance of Being Earnest together in August, and there were like 2 or 3 quotes from that book. So that was a lot of fun just to have that little bit of a reference back to the book we read previously. But anyway, so those are all of the books that I read in August and September. There were a lot of them. Unfortunately, most of them were just mediocre for me. I'm hoping September was better than August, and I'm hoping October will be a continuing, like an uptrend. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.